as currencies. Interestingly, the Chinese yuan just became its official reserve currency, something I'm sure the US government greeted with excitement. A country could then similarly choose to view a new alternative currency as legal tender. Yet the deeper problem with paper currency and coinage is its own virtue as currency. Namely, its size and portability make it difficult for such parallel economies not to collapse into a single effective economy, especially where one hopes for each currency having different market dynamics. This problem, however, is potentially curtailed with purely digital currencies. For me, the advent of corporate member loyalty programs such as Aeroplan, I learned so much from Aeroplan, starting in 1984, that employ electronic point systems redeemable for flights or other merchandise, pointed to this possibility early on. Such loyalty programs are not a competitive market with various price setters, but serve purely as a marketing tool for companies. However, these digital loyalty programs, unlike Canadian Tire Money, had indicated the technological capacity to create a transaction space that only interacts with other existing currency markets as stipulated by the regulators of the system. In this case, the Aeroplan loyalty program now allows a member to purchase Aeroplan points for Canadian dollars. It does not allow, to my knowledge, one to exchange Aeroplan points for Canadian dollars. At the same time, controls over pricing, effectively rates of inflation, and rates of redemption of Aeroplan points are managed internally. By the mid-1990s, I was seeing the conceptual need for a second alternative economy that built on an alternative electronic currency with stipulated conditions for users. The need for what I then termed a second economy grew in light of evidence I was gathering in the area of long-wave economics, notably observed by the Russian agricultural economist Nikolai Kondratyev in the 1920s. His analysis showed a periodic collapse in pricing in modern economies every 45 to 60 years, which I linked to the concentration of wealth within an economy. This economic concern was even deeper than earlier concerns I had with the loss of state authority through trade agreements, as it suggested the inability of the state to effect some form of meaningful redistribution through taxation would effectively hasten a market collapse or depression, as witnessed in the 1930s. However, even with state redistribution of a kind, market collapse is still, or would still be pending. Such a crash in market terms would, in my view, be the economic equivalent of a Hobbesian state of nature that was a solitary, poor, nasty permission short. The existence of a single global integrated market facilitated by freely interchangeable currencies effectively creates an economic monoculture globally, so that when this market crash eventually arrived in 2008, it was a global crisis. Central banks coordinated to print record amounts of their various currencies and drastically reduced interest rates in response to the crisis. This favored the already favored at the expense of the worst off. The lack of alternative economic transaction space or spaces meant that not only the banks were too big to fail, in Bernie Sanders' words, but the economy itself was too big to fail. Global governments and citizens were overbearing. We can now fast forward to 2009 and the arrival of Bitcoin. What I would like to do for the remainder of this time is discuss some of the innovations of Bitcoin, as well as what I would see as some of its ethical shortcomings. In doing so, I would like to explore how an alternative digital currency concerned with addressing these shortcomings could, in turn, address some of the deeper issues of a race to the bottom accruing through deregulation and unrestricted global competition, and some of the issues of wealth concentration I've identified. I should note that I'm indebted to both my colleagues in the philosophy department for pointing me to a number of issues and resources on this topic, as well as my team teachers in the philosophy, politics, and economics course this past semester, Jim Farney in political science and John Wright in economics. For those unfamiliar with Bitcoin, Bitcoin is sometimes viewed as a currency, but also sometimes as a quasi-currency. A quasi-currency, or near money, describes highly liquid assets that can be easily converted into cash. The 2008 banking crisis showed, however, that near money is not, in fact, real money, when real money is in short supply. The United States IRS in 2014, ruling on Bitcoin, sees it as a kind of asset, treating it as a property for tax purposes as opposed to currency. therefore subjecting it to capital gains tax and allowing legal investments in Bitcoin and profit making. Some have argued that Bitcoin is not a currency due to its fluctuation in value. In the early days, its price was approximately $13 per Bitcoin, which then peaked to $1,137 per Bitcoin in 2013. It dropped again to $183 in 2015 when one of the largest Bitcoin exchanges, Mt. Gox, collapsed, and now it is hovering at about $430 per Bitcoin. This radical fluctuation means that individuals are using it more as a speculative asset versus pricing goods and service with it, thereby using it for such exchanges in a reliable, predictable manner. However, for many, Bitcoin is employed very much for transactions. At the global level, it provides a means for reducing sometimes cumbersome and costly global transactions mediated by banking institutions, or transactions seeking to avoid certain kinds of oversight. I'll talk about that later. While others have sought to advance its use by local merchants in a variety of communities. It is termed a digital currency because, apart from attempts to create novelty physical Bitcoins, the platform of exchange is internet-based and allows for near instantaneous transactions. For those viewing it as a digital currency, it is often defined further as a cryptocurrency. I like that word, cryptocurrency. Meaning, now if I can find my spot again, meaning that it is a medium of exchange using cryptography to secure transactions and to control the creation of new units of currency. This means that transactions are encrypted, allowing a degree of anonymity from third parties, as well as a means for preventing the undermining of the currency. Other currencies are undermined in other ways. So in the case of metal coinage, you get debasement of the coin, where you don't put as much metal into it as you had said you were going to do, or in the case of paper currency, the issue of counterfeiting. Whether Bitcoin is an asset or a full-fledged currency may depend on the circumstances of its use, and perhaps this debate is more akin to debate about whether light is a particle or a wave. Certainly, however, it is viewed by some in the world of central banking as a threat to the currency system, which suggests its use as a currency is being taken seriously. In examining the ethics of Bitcoin, one might adopt a view that Bitcoin is more ethical than traditional currencies based on participants' use of existing property rights and ability to freely contract with each other. Unlike some form of tacit consent that might be argued for in relation to duties to existing imposed state currencies, the users of Bitcoin freely and knowingly contract their resources in a self-governed community. They freely commit financial resources in the purchase of Bitcoin from others. They contractually agree to sell goods and services for Bitcoin at a given rate. Those who employ their technological resources to manage and cross-validate Bitcoin transactions are aware of how they are credited with new Bitcoin in relation to these mining activities. Finally, because the computer source code underlying Bitcoin is open source, this means that those who are technologically interested are able to freely inspect the technological parameters governing the creation and exchange of Bitcoin. The software itself, being built on open source software, is also constructed from the free donations of time and resources by individual developers and freely contracted employees of companies. Bitcoin can be seen to be built on a robust, user-driven model of volunteerism that embraces a diversity of causes and interests in its advancement.